Hello, Julian. I'm curious in listening to what you were discussing about Australian politicians in particular being sucked up into this system through forces a bit beyond them.
Yes.
I'm very curious to hear what you think the role of these companies, these big tech firms, have in upholding the value of WikiLeaks, what incentive they have to do so, and also what tools they have at their disposal to repress these encroachments. Thank you.
I'll tell you a story, and I have not said it in public before. You ask about the big tech companies and what their role is. And of course, there's no bigger company now involved in our lives than Google. Many of you here will probably have Google email. But what you don't know is that nearly every single web page you visit has embedded in it a Google advertisement or a Google tracking tool called Google Analytics. That means every single web page, just about, that you visit is recorded by Google. So Google knows which web pages you've visited, even if you think you've never used Google. Complete history of them. Google knows what you search for. It can see, as Snowden described, your thoughts forming as you type. Do you know what you were thinking about 2 years, 3 months ago? Exactly. No, you don't know. Not even your mother knows, but Google knows. So the question about how complicit Google is with the erection of this new transnational surveillance state that has been erecting itself most clearly in the Anglophone sphere, but it also spreads through most of the NATO countries. Is it a force against that, or is it a force for it? Well, back in 2011, I had a secret meeting with the chairman of Google, Eric Schmidt, who came out to see me under house arrest, together with 3 others. Now, you might think that that therefore represents that the big boys in Google are secretly on the side of organizations like WikiLeaks. That's not true. They have a much more complex agenda. Who came to see me? Eric Schmidt, chairman of Google, and immediately former CEO just 3 months beforehand. Lisa Shields, his girlfriend, who is the media manager for the Council for Foreign Relations and has extensive dealings with the State Department. Scott Malcolmson, former senior State Department advisor, now media manager for the International Crisis Group. And Jared Cohen. Jared Cohen, the advisor to Hillary Clinton and Condoleezza Rice, a young sort of want-to-be Kissinger figure, a Generation Y want-to-be Kissinger. Those people had as a pretext for their visit to me their research on a book. And on WikiLeaks, in fact, you can find the transcript of that recording to me, which we released in full. That book itself is called The New Digital Age. And I published a review of it in the New York Times about 2 weeks ago. Just search for just search for Eric Schmidt Assange and you'll find it. What's that book about? Well, on the back, it has a series of endorsements. The endorsements are Henry Kissinger, Bill Clinton, Madeleine Albright, Hayden, immediately former head of the CIA and National Security Agency, and Tony Blair, one of, if not the most famous warmonger in the world presently. Inside the book, in the acknowledgements, who is the first acknowledgement given to? The first acknowledgement. It's not in alphabetical order, it's in order of desire to acknowledge. First acknowledgement, Henry Kissinger. So this book, in fact, is a mechanism by which Google seeks not to sell books, not for Eric Schmidt to sell books, he's worth $6.1 billion, but rather to project itself into the Washington old power, the Kissingers and the Blairs and the Clintons and the former head of the National Security Agency and the CIA, to project itself there and show that Google can be America's geopolitical visionary, that it can see further about all America's interests. And the writing in the book is similarly catered, similarly presented. It is, in fact, Jared Cohen from the State Department, now working for Google, made director of Google Ideas, director of Google's own think tank, effectively director for Google Regime Change, if you look at his activities. Written by him, channeling Eric Schmidt. So the State Department channeling Silicon Valley. And you go, okay, well, that's a description of the book. Yes, it is very interesting that Kissinger's the central person in the acknowledgements and the collection of a cast of characters on the back. But is there anything more than that? Well, yeah, there's a lot more than that. 2 months after that meeting, and I have not described this publicly before, we had a reason to call Hillary Clinton, a legal reason to call Hillary Clinton, and to document that we were calling Hillary Clinton. And as some people, well, it's an interesting story actually. If you call the front desk of the State Department and ask for Hillary Clinton, can you actually get up to Hillary Clinton? Well, we've become good at this sort of game. So you do a person-to-person call. I have someone pretending to be my PA, wanting to place a connection of Julian Assange, Hillary Clinton. And so it starts to work up the ladders of the bureaucracy. Up and up and up the chain it goes. Those people who have seen Dr. Strangelove may remember this fantastic scene on the army base where he's trying to call the White House trying to speak to the president on a busted payphone, and put on hold and is gradually moving through the levels. Okay, so we move through the levels and get to Hillary's senior legal advisor, who says that Hillary's in some meeting outside the State Department, but there will be a call back. What happens? Well, one of our people, Joseph Farrell, some of you here may recognize him, receives a call from Lisa Shields, Eric Schmidt's girlfriend, as the back channel for Hillary Clinton, as the secret back channel. So what had actually happened? The Google guys, which were really kind of State Department guys, came and paid basically an unofficial State Department visit to Julian Assange and the WikiLeaks crew while I was under house arrest. Then they went back and reported that information at the highest level in the State Department, such that when someone called the State Department claiming to be my PA, what was the result? Well, we got up and up, went up to the highest levels, Hillary's senior legal advisor. And then it was just in their minds what had happened. So a call from someone who says they're Julian's PA. How can we verify they're really Julian's PA? Well, that's right. Lisa Shields and Jared Cohen, they were just out there. Yeah. Use Eric Schmidt's girlfriend, the chairman of Google's girlfriend, as the back channel. So at this level of US society, it's all musical chairs. Now, Google started out as part of Californian graduate student culture, a very nice, gentle, humane, somewhat naive and somewhat privileged culture around Berkeley and the Bay Area and Silicon Valley. Pretty decent. Californians at that level are much like Australians are. It's a pretty flat society. But as Google encountered the big bad world, as it encountered laws in different countries that it wanted to lobby against, as it encountered market competitors in different areas, Well, it does what Coke does. It does what Lockheed Martin does. It does what Northrop does. It does what Raytheon does. In fact, a statistic that came out just last week, Google now spends more money than Lockheed Martin, a giant weapons manufacturer, on paid lobbyists in Washington. So effectively, Google got real in dealing with the big bad world, and it needed a way to understand how to deal with the big bad world. And so it lent very, very heavily on the State Department and entered into its system, such that there's very close interconnects where you have the head of Google Ideas being a former advisor to Hillary and Rice and trying to ingratiate himself with Henry Kissinger. Google itself, as a strategic device, has launched the New Digital Age, this book, and pushed it around everywhere, McKinsey Consulting Group and so on, in order to ingratiate itself into the national security complex of the United States and show itself as the new geopolitical visionary for the United States. So it comes as no surprise whatsoever to me that Google has been involved in the prison system. In fact, if you look at the timescale, it was involved back in 2009. We can also look for Stratfor documents that WikiLeaks has released about Jared Cohen. It's a fascinating study. So it says Jared Cohen, director of Google Ideas, while working for Google Ideas, well, he's off running secret missions to the edge of Iran in Azerbaijan, where he's described by Fred Burton, senior vice president of Stratfor, this US intelligence company that we released details on. He's described by Stratfor as doing the work that the CIA can't do. Google is doing stuff the CIA can't do. Jared Cohen has State Department air cover, it seems, being involved in these activities. Then you can look up what was he doing in the cables. What do WikiLeaks cables say about him? Well, what they say is that he was, for example, in Afghanistan, trying to convince the 4 major Afghan telcos to move all their base station antennas onto US military bases. What was he doing in Lebanon? Well, in Lebanon, he was constructing a think tank secretly funded by the State Department to be an anti-Hezbollah, pro-Shia think tank. What was he doing in London? Well, he was telling Bollywood film executives in London that there were funds available to insert anti-extremist programming content into Bollywood films, and they could be linked up with people in Hollywood. So that's the director of Google Ideas. That's what Google's about. As Google encountered the big bad world, Google itself got big and bad.